Okay, come on. So
Thank
yes,
you, thank you, Dr. Conteh. Thank you, all of you out there on this beautiful Sunday. Um, we want to thank you for coming on again. Today, we want to discuss a few things and then tell you our plan for the future. Um, we want to look at there is news in the Gambia that the Gambia government is trying to uh, learn from Seychelles um, on how to uh, manage our state-owned enterprises in the Gambia. Uh, so a delegation has been sent to Seychelles to learn, to study how they are doing this. We all know that our state-owned enterprises have been struggling for decades. They've basically been running on losses, perennial losses year after year. And this has been a huge burden on taxpayers because government basically have been absorbing their losses uh, for decades. And this is a huge toll. It's really a drag on our economy in general. So there's been a lot of criticism of this, how these state-owned enterprises are performing. NAVIC, GAMTEL, GAMCEL, um, uh, Social Security Finance Corporation. Those are all state-owned. Um, uh, so, um, so there's a study group who went to Seychelles to put it in a nutshell, and the goal is to learn from best practices, as they would call it in the Gambia, how to manage these state-owned enterprises to make them profitable and to make them deliver to the Gambian consumers. Um, so, but it makes you wonder what happened to what they call, I think they call it Dr. Conteh, something like that. There is a monitoring, a regulatory, perhaps a monitoring body in the Gambia. I remember these bodies used to be um, uh, monitored by a body called PAPEC, I think, if I got that right. But I wonder what happened to that. What um, uh, are they not doing a very good job in monitoring these companies and making them accountable for their operations and how they're running these companies? But it just brought that to my mind. But Dr. Conte, what is apparent is that there's nothing wrong about trying to learn from other countries what they're doing best, that we can improve our systems also. But two issues I have with this is that um, at a time when we are trying to cut down on travel and all that stuff, I think we are trying to implement a digital economy, right? I think governments should really try to think about how to do some of these consultations or learning from other countries through digital means. Um, Instead of sending people to Seychelles, they could actually organize a Zoom or kind of an online conference or online discussion forum where the kind of an online outreach where they can get access to some of the key players in Seychelles state-owned enterprises to learn from them what are the best practices they are doing, so we can implement those too in the country. You know, we're in a digital economy now all around the world, right? We can learn a lot, without being present on the ground, right? There are digital tools that we can deploy, safe costing digital tools that we can deploy to learn from pretty much anywhere in the world, right? So I think government should think about those things, especially at a time when we are trying to put a lot of emphasis on creating a digital economy. We can start with some simple ones like this. This one do not need a lot of investment right now. We can actually implement those pretty quickly, without really spending too much money on travel and allowances on a group of people just to go to Seychelles. And considering that, based on the report, I think this was reported in the Point newspaper also. The officials who went there, actually, they said they learned in Seychelles that monitoring can improve these SOEs performance. And they said, well, I was like, is that it? You don't need to go to Seychelles to know that, right? We all know that. If you monitor a company, if you monitor effectively, obviously their performance will increase, right? Lack of monitoring, lack of evaluation and monitoring will definitely encourage bad behavior. Bad behavior in these companies and bad performance will follow that, right? But if you do a close monitoring, effective monitoring, and effective evaluation, make them accountable for what they do, their performance will increase, and they will begin to deliver to the consumers of the country. So there's nothing you don't need to go to Seychelles to know that, frankly speaking. So, just to bolster the point again that we can learn a lot of these things without, stepping outside our office, right? And also another thing, Doctor, I wanted to briefly say about this is that we can learn all these best practices from other countries and other institutions around the world, but one thing we cannot learn from Seychelles or any other country, is the fact that we are Gambians and we are going to continue to be Gambians, right? And what I mean by that is, in the Gambia, there's a way we do things. And unless we do not change the way we do things, no matter what we learn from other countries, no matter what best practices we learn from other countries, we are going to continue to be Gambians. Meaning, we're going to continue in our, under the table deals, cutting corners, sycophancy. We're going to continue to be Gambians, and we won't do anything right. We will always be driven by self-interest rather than the public interest. If self-interest is not bad, we are in a capitalist economy, right? And we are trying to encourage people to work in their own best interest, right? But if you're in public office, you are there to serve the people. We are paying you to do the job for the people, not for yourself. You cannot use public office to serve yourself. Outside public office, you can protect your own interests anyhow you want, but I mean, you cannot use public office primarily for your own interests. So self-interest in that, we don't mean it in that respect, right? So we have to review, we have to probably look at some aspect of this Gambianness. It's very easy to see. If you go to Gambia, once you step into that country, you see it is very blatant. Nobody even seems to hide it. It's not just the police officers. It's not just the immigration officers. Pretty much any public official is very much vulnerable to these tendencies. And I think those are some of the things that Gambia needs to work on. And you cannot work on those by pleading to people. You have to have robust laws that prevent this and robust consequences for actions that endanger public interest in terms of, especially when it comes to money, finances. there should be severe laws and severe punishments that come after you've been convicted of any of these things. And we need our officials to talk about these things too. President Barrow needs to be at the forefront. Come out and speak to the Gambian people. One thing I definitely want him to do more is to, speak more to the Gambian people. Tell them what he is doing with regards to some of these things. You cannot leave these things to ministers. Barrow is the elected person, elected official. The buck stops at him. Gambian people need to hear from him. He cannot lead from behind. So that much I want to say. Dr. Conteh, I don't know if you followed the Gambia's attempt to learn to reform how the SOEs are performing by implementing some of the strategies that Seychelles is using. And I understand that country is doing very well. Its SOEs are performing very well because there are robust monitoring of those companies, and they're doing quite well. So I'm glad that Gambia is attentive to this, and they are at least making some modest attempts to improve, learn from them. But again, we might still be defeated by the fact that we are going to remain Gambian. We're going to continue to do things the way we do it. So that's the first thing that I'll let you talk about that, and then we will go to look at a couple of other things. Particularly the cabinet meeting that kind of seeks to overturn, seeks to exempt oil companies from PURA regulation. We'll look at that briefly, and I'll talk about Nyang Njie leaving public discussion of politics. Dr. Conteh, trip to Seychelles. What can we learn from Seychelles?
I cannot believe it. Don't we have a ministry responsible for delivery?
I think so, yeah.
That they just created.
Right.
And did they go out there to collect per diems? Because you don't have to go to any country. You can simply even do Google and find research papers on how to run state-owned enterprises. Is this, are we looking at the profit nature or the profitability of these state-owned enterprises? And if that is the case, then we have to look at the total revenues that we have, most likely will be less than total expenses. So which means that expenses are higher than the revenues. We also look at the operating expenses, because when you look at an income statement, you have selling, general, and administrative expenses. We have higher administrative expenses to a point where they diminish our profit. Another area is that what kind of financing do we need to have? Do we rely more on government subventions as opposed to us getting Gambians and other investors to invest in those state-owned enterprises, thereby being shareholders? So if then that is the case, we should also respect auditors' reports, because last week they discounted, the government representatives counted, or actually doubted the auditor's report on Guy Construction Company. And if then that is the case, the Auditor General of the Gambia basically is the chief audit executive. And if they don't show any respect to that person's findings, they can go to the moon and try to find the best practices of running a state-owned enterprise. The result will be the same. So anytime you have a government involved in any activity, particularly when it comes to revenue generating activity, even in a governmental agency where you have a government, you have a enterprise activity, there's a likelihood that expense is going to be more than revenues derived. So I'm baffled. I don't understand why folks have to travel all the way to Seychelles to find that out when they can simply Zoom, or they can go online and read research papers about how to effectively how to run a state-owned enterprises efficiently. With the talent that they have of Gambians who are in diaspora, they could easily tap into that. But it seems like this is just another per diem chase where they're going to try to make money. We continue to have those things in our country, and I'm just baffled that they just created a ministry of supposedly a ministry that's supposed to be doing delivery for us, which I think is just duplication of services. Because then, who are you going? What delivery are you going to have when you have ministers responsible for each sector of the government? So this is another baffling thing to me, that I think they only went there just to get per diems. They could have tapped into the knowledge that they have of Gambians in diaspora. How about the consultants that they've been hiring constantly? They don't have any of them who can provide them with objective opinion as to how to run a state-owned enterprise effectively or efficiently. And also, why can't they simply use a Zoom conference? Because if you quantify the cost of air travel and all the costs involved, it's going to cost a lot of money. So I think privatization is the best way forward. And then we can create more millionaires in Gambia. But if you put government in charge of most of this stuff, it gets very baffling. So I don't understand why they're doing it. But since they've done it, they got their per diems, and nothing is going to come out of this.
Thank you, Dr. Conteh. Very well said. Yes, I think the goal is to improve the profitability of these SOEs and also to make them deliver services more effectively to the Gambian people. But again, like you rightly said, these SOEs probably they should be open up for private investment. But again, it's difficult for private money to go into these companies because there are no pretty good information about their finances. We have all seen when they go to National Assembly to discuss their finances, their books are not current. There are a lot of discrepancies. So that kind of shady bookkeeping does not encourage private investment. So there's still going to be challenges. It still all goes down to Gambianness, being Gambian, the way we are accustomed to do things. We don't seem to do anything properly. So it's going to be very difficult to attract private money into these SOEs. Full privatization would be an option. Probably they should consider that, or government should. I would rather go the middle ground. I would definitely go for a real reform of these enterprises. Government will demand that these companies operate more efficiently. Less of their money should be going into operations. They should possibly lean, operate leanly, reduce their size of operations. I mean, the labor and their expenses have to be looked at pretty closely and cut some of that very seriously to make them lean and more efficient. And government must insist that uh, management jobs are not guaranteed. It's going to be based on performance. If you're not performing, you're going to have to leave. You cannot continue to keep your job. Every year you will come for accountability. If you don't meet targets, you're going to have to give way to somebody else to try. So those are some of the little changes I think we have to insist on to make sure that these companies are doing well. At least they improve services. NAWEC particularly is costing Gambia, a lot. I mean, they were talking, even the Banjul disaster, NAWEC's name came up there. Part of the reason some of the machines were not working because NAWEC was not providing services. So, there's a huge, consequence for that. We all saw what happened in Banjul, and part of the blame goes to NAWEC for that. So we cannot overemphasize, the need for these companies to be seriously reformed and make them more responsive to the needs of Gambians. Dr. Conteh, having said that, we will also briefly talk about the cabinet meeting, the recent cabinet meeting that Barrow's administration just had. I understand the Ministry of Petroleum, Energy and Petroleum had submitted a paper to the cabinet for consideration of exempting oil companies, oil contracts from PURA. PURA is the regulatory body in the Gambia. Public Utilities and Regulatory Agency, I believe. They are seeking to exempt oil contract procurements from PURA approval, PURA's regulations. So I don't know what the goal of this is. It looks to me that they are trying to find a way to probably find a way to have a free hand in finding who it is cheaper to deal with when it comes to oil contracts. But I think this might end up opening another gate for more fraud and more embezzlement of public funds. We all recently know what happened at the petroleum place. There were three officials that were on trial, and they were acquitted by the court because government brought in not sufficient evidence against them. And many people are outraged about this government lack of diligence in prosecuting these people, because most Gambians believe these people are culpable for the huge losses that occurred at that place. So this might be another gateway. I think PURA should be able to regulate these contracts, these procurements. There's a good reason why there is legislation to allow PURA to regulate this contract, these procurements. If you remove that regulation, you are basically putting everything in the hands of these officials. And again, it goes back to what Gambians typically do. They're going to do what they do best, right? And so that's what concerns me about the idea of exempting oil contract procurement from the regulatory eye of PURA. Dr. Conteh, I will let you speak to this briefly. But I also think, though, let me add this pretty quickly. I think, though, the cabinet by itself cannot exempt um, oil contract procurement from PURA regulation. I think this may end up in a bill that may go to the National Assembly for consideration. Even though the National Assembly may still, rubber stamp it, it looks like to me. But I think the bill may finally head to the National Assembly. Dr. Conteh.
I'm still in disbelief. If you have a regulatory agency, why should you be requesting a unit of a government or business activity not to be exempted from procurement? I just cannot believe it. This is totally outrageous. I hope Parliament, I hope Cabinet doesn't approve this, and I hope Parliament can override this thing because I don't think it's right.
Thank you. Yeah, I really think it's going to head to the National Assembly, but I also believe that I seem to believe that the National Assembly is going to rubber stamp it. Frankly speaking, so it looks to me they are going to change the law simply to fit their circumstances. But the real truth is that this is going to make the oil sector, the energy sector, less efficient. There'll be a lot of leakages, even worse than what the three officials were being prosecuted for. So I don't think it's a great idea. I think instead they should allow PURA to even double up their regulation of this sector to make sure that procurements are done properly, contracts are given to people who deserve it by merit. Um, Otherwise, we are just going into difficult territory. And I think Gambia needs to be quite careful. The way things are running is not ideal at all, Dr. Conte. Just tomorrow, I understand the transportation sector is going on a strike. Drivers are going on a strike. So there may be no transportation in the country tomorrow. Um, um, the infrastructure minister, Ibrahim Silla, is saying that his doors are still open for negotiation with the drivers. But that is not going to do much to bring the drivers to his door. He needs to throw something at them to resolve this issue. And he's also saying that they're going to deploy buses. They're going to deploy public transportation. But Gambia has a very scanty public transportation. Lots of people depend on taxis and private transportation to get to where they need to go to. So, those buses, I don't even know how they're going to organize their deployment, but I don't think it's going to serve the needs of the Gambia. So, and there are too many scandals, coming up right now. Gambia is just moving from one scandal to another. After this, there is a demonstration that is being planned by another group later on. And the atmosphere in the country is quite, in my view, is quite apprehensive right now. So Barrow needs to really make a serious effort to diffuse some of these things. We cannot run our country like this. It's potentially going to be problematic. Dr. Conte, I think that's all I have to say on those things. I want to briefly talk about Nyang Njie leaving public engagement. I call it We Have Come Home. Nyang Njie gives up on his country. That's a pretty apt headline, I call it. When I saw that, it reminds me of Larry Peters' poetry. Peters wrote a poem called "We Have Come Home," and here Peters is very pessimistic, uh, actually disappointed about what he found after he returned, and not only him, but he was talking about his generation who went abroad, studied hard, get these qualifications, and returned back to the country with huge hopes, of transforming these countries, set them on a footing for success, only to be disappointed when they arrive home and found that everything has gone wrong. The present has taken over the past. Uh, the past has been totally obliterated, destroyed, and we don't even know where we are going. Very pessimistic view of our countries, newly independent African countries. Peters, throughout his life, as far as his literary life is concerned, he remained very pessimistic about the prospect of the Gambia. Um, and so Nyang Njie pretty much reminds me of that. Nyang Njie seems very disappointed, very frustrated about the direction of the country. He has been a vocal activist, which we must commend him for. And a lot of times I find him very informed especially about the operation of the Gambian government. I understand he worked at the finance ministry for some time. So he seemed to have a pretty good understanding of how government works, particularly with regards to the economy. So I found him quite intelligible in that aspect. I don't always agree with him, but Nyang Njie announced recently, and I watched his video on Facebook, so it must be true. If it appears on Facebook, it has to be true, right? So, so I watched him on Facebook making this announcement. It's very disheartening for me myself, but I think we cannot despair. We have to persevere, and Peters encourages. He said in his poems that we cannot despair. We have to persevere. And interestingly, in his poem, The Present Reign Supreme, Peters talked about the shallow water flow in the shallow gutters. So he was talking about the deplorable nature of Banjul and our country in general. And so he could have been speaking about the Banjul project, right? That Nyang Njie criticizes a lot, right? I'm not trying to interpret Peter's poems in a slanted interpretation of it. But if you read those lines, he could have been talking about, of course, he could not have foreseen Banjul in 2022. These poems were written way, way, way back. But he could have been talking about that, right? Nyang Njie is going to retire. And in his speech, he mentioned Madi Jobate also. Madi is another big activist about the Gambia. He doesn't, he is, I would say he's he's been blacklisted by the Barrow administration. I remember when I was in Gambia, this late spring, Barrow was addressing the religious leaders for the Conteh, and he personally mentioned Madi Jobate and actually threatened him of arrest and probably prosecution and stuff like that. So Madi is another thorn in the flesh of the government, just like in Nigeria. And this can be quite costly. I know the Gambia is, if you are known to be a critic of the government, everybody tries to run away from you. Nobody wants to be seen in public with you because they're all afraid that they will be considered to be in the same, to be a bedfellow with you, and it could cost them their job. Sometimes it could cost them their safety. It's kind of a legacy of Jammeh era, right? We did not know this to be the case during our regime. But in Jammeh's regime, once you are known to be a critic of the government or you have been arrested by the Jammeh government, all your friends run away from you. Nobody wants to be seen with you because they don't want to be labeled to be a sympathizer or even a friend of yours, because it could cost them their job, it could cost them their safety and their family's safety and security. So we still have that thing in the Gambia. So being in the opposition or being an activist can be quite costly, right? And considering that there's almost no private sector in the Gambia, except a few banks. Most educated Gambians depend on government for employment. Once they are out of their jobs, they go straight into poverty because, unfortunately, many of us are not very creative to be entrepreneurs, right? We depend on government jobs. So everybody runs for cover when they know you are an activist against the government and stuff like that. That should not be the case, but that is the situation we have in the Gambia. So Nyang pretty much gave up, on the country. I suspect living has become difficult for him in the country. I understand since his days in IOC, Organization of Islamic Conference, he's not been employed by government or a steady private company. He may have been consulting, but it's difficult in Gambia when everybody snubs you. Everybody needs networking, right, to be able to access info and access jobs and access, to be able to live, a decent life in a country. But when everybody who matters, try to avoid you like a fly, so it can be pretty tough. Gambia can become very unlivable for you. But again, we have to persevere. Gambians have to persevere, not to despair, not to give up, right? You know, um, these things get remembered, right? Everybody must live for something, right? It might be difficult, but you got to leave a legacy, right? So, cowards don't leave a legacy. We remember people always who do their best to change societies for the better, right? Life may be difficult, but so that much I wanted to say um, about Nyang Njie's situation, Dr. Conteh. What do you make of the fact that, not about Nyang Njie per se, but the fact that being an activist in the Gambia can be very costly and can be a very lonely job for somebody in the country. And here's a line I want to say from Peter's poetry also. When Peters was talking about the present reigning supreme, the present reigns supreme, meaning today's bad leadership, uh, today's lack of values in the Gambia has literally destroyed what Gambians are known for in the past. Gambians are known for integrity, right? Gambians are known for being very friendly. Gambians are known for being very exemplary in character. And it looks like one can argue that all these things have become things of the past in the Gambia. So we go home with the feeling that we have a nostalgia for the past, right? It looks like many Gambians want to return to the past rather than continue with the status quo. Things cannot be worse than what they are. Even many Gambians, to my surprise, are rethinking their position on Jammeh. Many Gambians are now arguing that Jammeh was the best for Gambia. even though Jammeh has committed so much atrocities in the country. A lot of my friends have been to jail for no reason under Jammeh. So if I see Gambians arguing today that Jammeh, with all the atrocities he committed, he's the best for the Gambia, that can be the lowest that we can go, in my view. We have fought for a democracy for 22 years, and we have been lucky to get one, actually by plucking it from the jaws of the dictator, and we have come to create a system that everybody now is saying is worse than what we had on the Gambia. That is just mind blowing. Dr. Conte.
Well, when it comes to Nyang Njie, I just think about the young banana lady that he forcefully kidnapped and paid.
Breaking into his house.
No, the girl did not break into his house.
That's what.
Because he left his 8-year-old son there,
Right.
and for him to talk nasty about the people of Banjul, generalizing, Kolongo Jatala, Nyanjala Kolongo Jatala, and arrogance will not take you anywhere in politics. Thinking that you know more than everybody will not take you anywhere in the country. Taking advantage of his association with some of the higher ups when Barrow came in and buying Jammeh's vehicle. It was just like yesterday. So I have no feelings for him, man. Because if we want to represent the Gambia despite our ills, we should let arrogance out of our discussion. And for anyone to make a video of a whole city that you were born in and calling them names, generalizing everyone, putting them in one pot, no, that's not the politics we should be looking for. Is there a financial gain behind this? No. I have no sympathy on him on this. I challenge him to say that let's go to Banjo at 11 o'clock in the morning. You and I on the street and see who they're going to attack. I don't feel sorry for him. Arrogance will take you nowhere. We should learn from other politicians who, when they came in, how arrogant they were. We have pressing issues in our country, and we need to mediate, moderate, negotiate to solve the problems. Yeah, it's only now they're talking, but when they were working at the finance ministry, when it came to fuel and how the fuel was bypassed to gas stations, and how fraudulent activities were done when it came to duty waivers, interesting, and how such a person can talk about corruption when they were corrupt themselves, immerse themselves in wealth, only for Jammeh to discover and fired them, took refuge in Senegal, came back trying to reincarnate, try to revisit themselves to put them in a good situation where Gambian can say these are our heroes. They just seize the moment. We never heard of them. They only talked when Jammeh got rid of them because of their corruptions. They came in again when Jammeh was booted out. What happened? They used their family connections to buy Jammeh's vehicles. And now these people are the ones who are calling themselves the heroes. They call themselves heroes. Where was he fired IOC. He didn't leave voluntarily. Yeah, karma came back. I don't wish bad luck on any Gambian, but arrogance should not be part of our vocabulary. The way Gambians are suffering, and if Barrow is the leader of the country, we cannot force our way in. We have to engage him because probably the president is not aware of most of the stuff going on. Because if you try to have a dialogue with the president, those at the state house will not allow you to meet with him. They did the same thing on the Sadauda, the hypocrites. When Sadauda had problem with Sisi first, no one came to tell Sadauda Bibiam Baila Barinata Tonyala for it. The same thing happened between Sadauda and Serif Mustafa Deba. No one stood up. And when it was about time for Sadauda even to make peace with the late Serif Deba, the same hypocrites went in and messed everything up. Nyang Njie came in. Njie, to some extent, was doing good, but the same hypocrites came in. What happened? Njie drove away good people, and that caused his own downfall. When Adama Barrow came in, the same hypocrites came, say, we want to have tactical alliance. Same hypocrites went between Dabo and Usainu Dabo and Barrow. They got divided. And those who went to till for Barrow during the election, after the 2021 election, they slowly got rid of them. For now, for some people to say, oh, Niaje, Imam Fendin, Alkali Conteh Koikana Fendina, which is hypocrisy. So Barrow will face the same fate, and I hope if he doesn't turn around, they're not going to win any chairmanship election in the country. So hypocrisy is what is going on in the country. People who can find ways to enrich themselves, hide behind that say I'm an activist. Karma has come. When that young girl was out there selling bananas, I challenged Nyang Njie to say, I told him you don't have empathy. You shouldn't have asked whether that young girl was going to school and what grade she stopped at. But you paid a police officer to kidnap the girl and put her in a vehicle and took her to a police station, and you bragged that she was convicted. Karma came. Nyang Njie ila kolon jatale fente bulu. Arrest my case, buddy.
Thank you, Dr. Conteh. Thank you very much for being here again. I wanted to say that this Friday we have Dr. Yafa from the University of the Gambia to speak with us briefly, probably about an hour. We normally meet here on Sundays, but we're going to find time this Friday so we can accommodate Dr. Yafa. We're going to talk about agribusiness in the Gambia. Agriculture is a big, important sector in the country. So it has a huge potential for employment and GDP growth. So we will have Dr. Yafa, who is a professor at the UTG and also has a farm in the Gambia. So we'll talk to him about agribusiness in the Gambia. Agribusiness in the Gambia is projected to be $1 trillion industry by 2030, if I remember my numbers right. But I'll break this down a little bit when we come back here on Friday. So there's a huge potential. Hopefully, we will probably convince some of you, particularly those in the diaspora, to consider investing in agriculture, agribusiness in the Gambia. There's a lot of challenges there, but improvement is possible. So we will discuss that in detail with a very knowledgeable person in this aspect. Dr. Sidat Yafa will be here on Friday at 1:30 Central Standard Time, which will be 6:30 in the Gambia. So we encourage all of you to join us in the conversation and share your views with us on Friday. I think that's all I have, Dr. Conteh, for today. Unless you have any final words, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up today and meet again Friday, and then we'll still meet on Sunday. But we're going to meet on Friday with Dr. Sidat Jaffa.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Conteh. Thank you for being here. We'll meet again soon. We thank you all out there for being here with us. Send us your comments, your observations. Again, Dr. Conteh, let me say this briefly before we leave. One of our viewers suggested that we should try to say some of our discussions in Mandinka or any of the local languages. So in the coming weeks, and I really value that suggestion. So in the coming weeks, I'll probably try to speak a little bit in Mandinka and Wolof. I got to brush up my Wolof and Mandinka a little bit. Unfortunately, I cannot speak Fula, but we'll try to do what we can to reach out to other people who may not benefit from the English language. But thank you again, Dr. Conteh, for being here. We'll meet again soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.